We are working through the book of Acts really slowly, but we're going to be done in 2 more lessons after today. So super excited for that. We'll have done the entire book of Acts in about 2 years. So that was fun. All right, so let's pick up where we ended last week. Last week we did our very own, I called it our Dateline story, because there was so much in that lesson we had no idea what to do. So last week we ended up with Paul. He knew he needed to get to Jerusalem. Everyone told him, you're going to go to Jerusalem, you're going to be bound, thrown in prison. That's exactly what's happening. He did go to Jerusalem, and this is what happened. They arrested him, and they were going to scourge him, which is that horrible, put your hands out, and we're going to whip your back until there's nothing left. It's a horrible, horrible thing. But he pulled the Roman card. I am a Roman, and because I'm a Roman, you have to send me to Rome, and you can't scourge me. So that's basically what was going on in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, because the Jews hate Paul so much because of his message about Jesus, what they do, 40 of them came up with this plot, and they were going to kill Paul. That was the plan. But his nephew found out about it, went to one of the Roman commanders, and they got Paul out of there. So they ended up with a whole bunch of soldiers, and they took him to Caesarea on his way to Rome so that he would be tried in Rome. Now, I showed you this last week, but I always like to show you this. This is Caesarea, and the reason why I like to show it to you is because I want you to see that these are real places. If you ever go to Israel, you got to go here. This is where Herod's palace was. There was a Roman temple. There was the place. This is where he would have been. Put in prison. It's right on the Mediterranean Sea, and there's ruins all over the place. They actually found a stone that talks about Pilate, Pontius Pilate, so they know that he also had a place here too. So this is what that looks like there. So this is where Paul would have gone, and the whole purpose for him going was, it's a stop along the way. I'm just going to stop here. I'm going to go in front of the governor, and then they're going to ship me off to Rome. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to try to stop this because I'm kind of bad at this stuff. Unfortunately, sometimes we have this idea in our mind that where I'm at is just a stop along the way. My new job starts in a month. This is just a stop along the way. My husband, I'm just engaged. We're about ready to be married, so the engagement's just a stop along the way. Like all of our life, there's these stop along the ways, and because we know in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, my life is going to change. So for Paul, he thought the exact same thing. He's thinking, stop along the way in Caesarea. I'm on a boat to Rome. Yay! He was super excited about that. But as God usually does, he sometimes has different plans than we do. And that's what I want us to really get today, that sometimes his plans are different. And for Paul, this quick stop along the way meant for him an additional 2 years. 2 years in prison. Like I said last week, wouldn't mind it. We're on the Mediterranean by the ocean, so I would be fine there. But 2 years being someplace where you don't want to be. And some of you get that. You're right there. You're saying, I don't want to be in the place that I'm at right now, and I'm kind of mad at God that he has me here. Because this is what I think. When I think about the Apostle Paul, I think it just seems pointless. Pointless and a waste of time that you would wait and have the Apostle Paul for 2 years at a place when people need him out there. We need him in Rome. We need him writing more books. We need the gospel to get out. We need Paul to be evangelizing. What do you mean he's just stuck in this stupid little prison for 2 years? It makes no sense. And some of you are right there. You're in a 2-year period, and you feel like whatever you're going through is pointless and a waste of time. But I'm hoping today you see that that's not true. Randy Alcorn is an author. He wrote an article called Trusting God When the Pain Seems Pointless. Look at what he says. And if you can get this in your brain, I think it'll help you through what you're going through. He said, I've written 9 novels. Suppose you could interview characters from my books. If you ask them, would you like to suffer less? I'm sure they'd answer, yes. I empathize with my characters, but as the author, I know that in the end, all their suffering will be worth it, since it's critical to their growth and to the redemptive story. God has written each of us into his story. We are a part of something far greater than ourselves, and God calls upon us to trust him to weave that story together so that in the end, that will never end in eternity, we will worship him slack-jawed at the sheer genius of the interwoven plot lines. I want to go back to that. God has written each of us into his story. And if you can just memorize that one statement and say, all right, I am a part of something so much bigger, that's so much greater than myself, and even the 2 years that Paul is stuck where he's stuck, God has a plan for. He said, but like my fictional characters who are clueless to my strategies, we lack the perspective to see how parts of our lives fit into God's overall plan. Cancer, disabilities, accidents, and other losses and sorrows appear devastatingly pointless. However, just because we don't see any point in suffering doesn't prove there is no point. That is something we need to just memorize. It's so incredibly insightful to realize that God has a purpose and a plan for any, and each of us has a story and a part of this big picture. Because if not, you never would have been created. And I think we got to really understand that God created each one of us to be a part of this grand epic story. And wherever he has you is where he needs you for that particular time. 2 Corinthians says this, therefore we do not lose heart. That's what I'm hoping today. You walk out of here and you do not lose heart. Even though our outward man is perishing, it's like everything around us just sucks. I don't know if you can say that, but there you go. Yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things that are not seen are eternal. So I started working on this lesson, and I started asking myself this. What does it actually mean to trust God? Because we say it all the time. We say, oh, you just need to trust God with that. Or I'm trusting God with this. Or I'm just trusting God. Or you need to trust. We say it all the time. And the more I say it, the more I say, what does that even mean? And I want to talk about that. There was a little boy walking down the beach. He looked at an elderly woman sitting there under an umbrella, and he walked up to her and he said, do you go to church? And she said, yeah. He said, are you a Christian? She said, yeah. He said, well, do you read your Bible? Yep. Do you pray? Yep. He said, perfect. Will you hold my quarter while I go swimming? Okay. Okay. Here's the point. We trust people who are trustworthy because we just know they're going to be there for us. But I'll tell you something, the last couple months, and you probably have seen it or heard it in my voice over the last few months, I've been really struggling with God. And I've been really struggling with this whole idea of what it means to trust him. Because to me, trusting him means I pray, I have faith, and I'm trusting him to do all sorts of things. Like we needed someone to rent the cabin in March, and because some people backed out. Well, we have bills to pay up there. So I sat down and I prayed because I knew God answered our prayer, months before. And I prayed and said, God, we need a renter. Okay, and my assumption is if I'm trusting God to do something, then you know what? His job is to make that happen for me. If I'm trusting God to heal my marriage, well, that's his job to make it happen. Like, do you see what I'm saying? If I trust Rob to go get the laundry, well, he's going to go get it. Like, so that's my viewpoint of what it means to trust God. Some of you are trusting God for your children to get off drugs, or for you to get pregnant, or that you don't have cancer. And because you're trusting him, our automatic thought process is, well, it's his job to just make that happen. But here's my question. What if he doesn't? Because I trusted God to rent the cabin out, and it did not get rented out. I have been trusting God to sell our house before property taxes were due, and that date has passed. I trusted God to heal Cheyenne's OCD. And you know what? That just did not happen overnight. And so in all honesty, I've been kind of frustrated with God. And so I was studying this. I started looking at people, and that's actually how I found our guest speaker for next week, because I'm like, what are the, she trusted God with her children and her husband, and then they all die? It's like, what's wrong with that? feels a little Debbie Downerish in here. I promise there's a good point to this, okay? But it's so frustrating to me because I wanted to know that other people felt the same way I did, because I don't know, we don't talk about it a lot, especially when if you're a pastor or teacher, you want everyone to know that everything's fine, and of course I believe and trust God. Well, you know what? Sometimes I have a really hard time with it, and it kind of frustrates me. And so I found an article by a girl named Jolene Underwood, and she wrote this one sentence. Here it is, statement: God will let you down, but he is still good. Now, as weird as that sounds, that resonated with me. Because I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of times in my life that I feel like God has let me down. And some of you are like, well, you can't do that. You teach the Bible. I do. I teach Bible. I know Bible. I love Jesus. I love God. I trust him with my life. But still, there's things about this I don't understand. And I don't think I'm the only one. Jackie Griggs, that's her, where this article was found. It's called What to Do When God Lets You Down. She said, we finally had the date chosen, venue booked, musicians rehearsing. My plans for a wedding and marriage were coming together rapidly. I looked forward to this new stage of life, and then my world turned upside down. A health crisis kept me in and out of the hospital for 3 days, after which my husband-to-be silently abandoned me. Everything about my life up to that point, my future, my job, my living situation, changed overnight without explanation. I was hurt by my fiancé, but I was mad at God. And I think that a lot of us are at that place. Sometimes our plans change abruptly, or our circumstances are less than ideal. It might be for any number of reasons, but what happens when it seems like God has let us down? When God doesn't meet our expectations and we start doubting God, his goodness, or his love? At times I try to define God by my circumstances. When my life doesn't seem to be going right, it can feel like God doesn't love me or hear my prayers. But that doesn't line up with what the Bible says. Instead, I need to change my perspective. Here's my thinking. This is what she said. I need to let the truths in the Bible shape how I see my situation in God. See, we look at things like the world does, and we look in front of us and we say, everything's falling apart. Instead of stopping and saying, wait a minute, I need to look at my situation through the eyes of God and what I need to learn about this in my own life. I think we need to change our perspective on what it means to trust God. I think for some of us, we need to even understand what that means in the first place. So I started wondering, what does it mean? Because like I said, this is what I think. What I trust him for, he should do. That's just coming. And what do I do when he doesn't do it? It's so frustrating. Because my point is if I trust him for something and he doesn't do it, what is the point to trust him for anything? Like in reality, really. But I think with God, we have to look at him completely different. And we can't look at trusting him like I look at trusting Rob or trusting you. I think we have to look at God completely different. Jolene says this in her article. She said, I felt let down by God plenty of times. Like when I did all the things that I knew to do as a believer and still ended up falling apart in depression, anxiety, or letting angry words and actions spew forth. Or when it seemed my marriage was going to end despite all the things I thought I did right, despite all the prayers I prayed, or when God didn't send what I needed the way I thought he should provide it. If I believed God would never let me down, and then he did, I think I might give up on God. Plenty of people have. See, I think plenty of people have because of that exact reason. I think when we expect God to do what we want, we will inevitably face disappointment. See, something's got to change, because if we don't, we trust God for something, he doesn't come through, then we are going to face disappointment, and a lot of people walk away from God. Here's the point that we need to get to. But when we surrender to what God wants, I think that's what trusting God is all about. It's saying, here you go, God, this is what I want. I'm praying for this. I'm begging you for it. I'm trusting you for it. But there has to be a but. When we surrender to what God wants, we face a greater God. God will let us down, but he will never fail us. And there is a huge difference between the two. One suggests God does what we want. See, so many of us, and me apparently, just think that God needs to do what I need him to do. And I don't think it works like that. The other remembers God will be with us when we feel let down by him not doing what we want. See, there's a big difference between the two. But like Randy Alcorn says, since he's an author, he said he's the author and he has these characters. So I was thinking about this and I thought, well, that would be like one of his characters saying, hey, Randy, hey, I'm trusting you that you're going to get me, pregnant at this time, or you're going to get me that house that I need or that job. I mean, you're the author. I mean, you could write that in the script. But Randy going, it's not in the script. I'm not rewriting the script for you. I already got it figured out. And we, the characters, have to trust the author that he actually knows what he's doing. I don't think it's the author's job to change a book plot just to accommodate the characters. See how that works when you really kind of start thinking that through? It's like if Dusty came to us when he was 10 and said, Mom and Dad, I'm trusting that you're going to get me a Porsche when I'm 16. Okay. Really? Okay. No, every day he wakes up, I'm trusting, I'm believing, I have faith. I just know that you're going to get me a Porsche when I'm 16. Well, us, as the parents, we know that's not a good thing. You're not giving a 16-year-old a Porsche, okay? That doesn't work. He doesn't know that. He doesn't know the ramifications. He can trust all he wants, but it's still not going to change our minds. So see, you and I can trust all we want for what we want, but it's not going to change God's mind if it's not what he wants. So what trusting actually means is this. We're trusting him for what he needs done. Cheyenne said the other day, she said, Mom, I hate having OCD. It's such a struggle for her, and it's such a struggle daily. And my problem with that is that I pray that God heals her. I trust that God will heal her. But I'm trusting God to do what I want. I want her to be healed because I'm her mom, and I want her better, and this is what I want. And when I do that, it kind of makes it like Santa Claus, like in the sky. That's what God seems to be like. Like, I just want this, and I expect because you're like Santa Claus, God in the sky, you have to do what I want. But for Cheyenne, I don't know what to say to her, so this is what I say. We have to trust that God wants to use that in your life to draw you closer to him and help others. I don't know what else to say to her except that God is going to use it somehow, most often because of this. He sees something bigger. Something bigger is in play that we might not see. I think that's what trusting God is all about. It's not to get what we want, but it's to come and surrender under what he wants. And I think when we get that, I think it will change our life. Cheyenne, I learned this about, 4 or 6 weeks ago. She had this major OCD breakdown. I think I told you guys about it. Called some of you in here, and honestly, you were the prayer warriors around her at the time because I was a disaster area. And I was really mad at God because I don't like it when I feel out of control, but I think that God wants us to get to the point that we feel out of control so we can surrender under his control. And I kind of think I had to learn that. But then I relearned something during that episode and the next one that she had a couple weeks ago. And this is what I learned. It's interesting about Bible study, is that I will learn something that I taught 2 years ago. And I'll be like, oh, how did I forget that? That's why you should keep coming to Bible study and keep going to church, because we tend to forget the things that are important. But I learned something from an Old Testament story. For those of you that remember the story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, okay, everyone knows that, most likely. Nebuchadnezzar was reigning. He built a big statue of himself. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were the 3 Jewish boys. They were told that they had to bow down to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. And they're like, yeah, we're so not doing that. We believe in the one God, the one true God. We would never bow down to a statue. It's never going to happen. So they trusted God, sort of. Here's how this looked out. Daniel 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. That is, in the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand." Now, that's trust. There's the fire. It's burning. They're saying, bow or we're throwing you in. They're like, no, we're fine. God is going to get us out. That is pure, unadulterated trust right there. Until you get to the next verse. See it on the bottom? But if not. What? You just said you trust God that he's going to get you out of the fire. And now you come over here and you say, wait a minute, but if not. No. It seems like a lack of trust, but I don't think it is. I think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego really, really understood what it meant to trust God. And they weren't trusting him just to get them out of the fire or get them out of the bad situation or make them all better. They trusted that God would do what he needed to do for a bigger purpose. He said this in 18, but if not, if God doesn't get us out, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. See, I don't think trusting God has anything to do with us and what we're trusting God for, like the cabin renting or the house selling or whatever. I think trusting God means this, regardless. That we walk into any situation and we believe that regardless if we get what we're praying for or if we don't get what we're praying for, here you go, there's always a point. God always has a point and a purpose for what he's doing. And maybe for the cabin not renting out, it was my way of continually saying, God, I need you to provide, I need you to provide. Maybe it was a place for God wanting to teach me something. And maybe he has the perfect buyer for our house in 6 months and it will totally blow our mind when it happens. Maybe for Cheyenne, he's teaching her things that he can only teach her and it's going to take OCD to do it. I don't know. But trust says this, no matter how God answers our prayers, no matter how. Some of you know that. You're praying for one thing and God seems to be doing the other. Your choice is to walk away from him or to do this. No matter how he's answering your prayers, you know God is present. You know he has never left you. He's in the midst of all this. He's telling you to hang on. And we know that he has a purpose. And suddenly when I read that story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it gave me this whole renewed insight on what it meant to trust God. There's a lady in here, and I didn't ask her if I could share her story, so I won't give you her name. But she had surgery many years ago. And the doctor came in, and she told the doctor, she said, I've been praying, and I trust God that he's going to do this in the surgery. It's not even a doubt in my mind. I know God is going to do this. Well, when the surgery was over, she woke up, and God didn't do what she prayed for. But I'm going to tell you something about her. She is the greatest intercessory prayer. She prays for people's health. It didn't sway her at all that God told her no because she knows that he has a purpose. And because by God saying no to that prayer that she absolutely trusted and believed God for, she's this different person now. She has more empathy for people who are sick and hurting, and she prays for them, and she prays for miracles for them, even though God didn't give her a miracle. See, we can do one of two things. She could be mad, I hate God, I'm mad at him, it's just ridiculous, and walk away, or she could come under, surrender, and say, God, I'm just trusting you to know that you have a purpose. There was a pastor. He was an avid golfer, and he took part in a local golf tournament one time. And he was preparing to tee off. The organizer came up and said, hey, pastor, notice that really big storm cloud coming over there. He said, I'm trusting that you're going to see to it that the weather won't turn bad on us. Okay. The pastor shook his head and he said, I'm sorry, I'm in sales, not management. Okay. But when I read that, I thought, wait a minute, that's the truth. It's like this. God is management. He just is. And when you and I get that, here you go. Oh, there. The light bulb goes on. It goes on. It's this light bulb moment when you're like, oh my gosh, God is management. I'm just in sales. I do what he wants me to do. And when the light bulb's on, it says this, no matter what happens, I know God's got this. I just do. I don't know how he's going to do. Well, I learned this with Cheyenne the second time she had her OCD breakdown. I looked at it completely different. I saw it with the light bulb on. Because when you walk through life, normally the light bulb's off. We look at our situation and we're just like, I'm miserable, my marriage is miserable, my husband's miserable, my kids are miserable, everything, the world's falling apart. Because we're not looking at it with God in the picture at all. But the minute you and I turn this light bulb on, it's like, wait a minute. God's doing something in our family, with my marriage, with my husband. I don't know what it is, but I know he's got a purpose for your life. And I know whatever it is, you're going to get through it. And on the other side of it, you're going to say, I'm going to be able to help a whole lot more people because I'm looking at it with the light bulb on. when that light bulb's on, we can learn, here you go, we are fully assured that he's the author and has a perfect plan for us as the characters in his story. We just do. We can look at seemingly unanswered prayer or not answered the way we want prayer and be, you know what, I'm still assured that he's got this. I really am. When I looked at Cheyenne's last meltdown, the first time, like I said, with the light off, I was a wreck. I I talked to these girls. I was like, I don't know, God won't do anything, and I'm mad at him, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that was me. Then I learned all this, relearned it. And the light bulb went on, and she had another episode a couple weeks ago, and I'm telling you what, everything about it was different for me. Because suddenly I was like, I had peace. And I'm like, God, I don't know. I'm not mad at you and I'm not angry at you anymore because I know you're doing something in Cheyenne's life and I don't know what it is. But because of these two really bad episodes, she got on new medicine, which has been helping her. She got a new doctor. And honestly, she's like a new person. Sunday, she sends over a blog and it's all on OCD. And she said, Mom, I want you to read my blog. And as I read it, I thought, God, you are so good. Because had you just healed her 4 or 6 weeks ago, she never would have written this blog. And this blog is going to help so many people with OCD because she's helping them try to figure out what to do when they have these episodes like she does. See, I think trust is all about saying, God, I know you know what you're doing. And I'm just going to go with that. And that's hard. It's not, God, I want what I want. It's, God, what I want, what you want. All right, all that to get to Paul going to Rome. Now, Paul had to learn to trust God because remember now he's sitting in prison for 2 years, and that's not what he's expected to do, but he does that. But here's the cool thing about Paul. We don't see Paul mad at God or frustrated with God. We just don't. Wherever God puts Paul, he's like, oh yeah, I'm here. I'm in it for the long haul, whatever. Imagine if you and I could live like that. The people around us would be like, oh my gosh, I want what you have. I want to be a Christian like you are because you're so peaceful. You're not worried about those bad things that I'm worried about. And then we see him trusting that the place God has him, that is the place that God needs him. Always remember that wherever God has you, God needs you right there. Maybe there was people in Caesarea that needed to hear about Jesus that honestly, if he were on a boat to Rome, their destination would be hell because they never would have heard about Jesus. But because he stayed 2 years, maybe there's going to be a plethora of people in heaven because of this. Here's the thing that you and I need to know when it comes to trusting God. I don't know why God does a lot of things that he does. I honestly don't. I don't know why he doesn't heal us immediately. I don't know why he doesn't let people get pregnant. I don't know why he doesn't save the marriage or get you the job. This week we saw the movie Breakthrough. I'm sure most of you saw it. It was a really, really good movie. If you haven't seen it, you need to go and see it. Rob and I went, and then you'd be proud of me, I was a good grandmother. I took my granddaughter, 15-year-old granddaughter, and I went to the movies. It was like super awesome. I was like, this is what grandmothers do. Okay, awesome. So I took her to the movies, and we went to see it. And at the very end, spoiler alert, shut your ears if you don't want to hear this, if you haven't seen it yet. I'm sure you probably know what happens. But at the very end, there's this lady, and there's this great scene of this lady, and she comes to him afterwards, and she said, why did God save you and not my husband? It was a great moment. And this poor kid's like, I don't know. I honestly don't know. And he had to really struggle through that. And so when we got out of the movie, I told Sierra, I said, Sierra, here's the deal. What just happened there, that was amazing. Because every so often, God does step into the natural realm that we have here and does something so miraculous. And it's so amazing, and we're so grateful. But for that one scene, there's hundreds of thousands of parents who have prayed the same thing and buried their children. And I said, so I don't know why. So my point is, Sierra, I want you to learn to trust God whether he comes through like this or he doesn't. It's really important that you go through life knowing that because I don't know, and then you'll have peace. Look at this verse, Isaiah 26. You will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. See, you and I are going to have peace when we continually focus on God and when we continually trust in him, then we know that whatever happens, we can be okay with it. It's the best I can come up with that. And then for Paul, I think maybe God isn't done using us or Paul in those tough spots, because Paul's still in a tough spot. He's literally in prison in Caesarea. So, Acts 24, we are going to get through this today. Acts 24, 5 days later, the high priest Ananias, remember Ananias from last week? He's the mean, awful ruler that's wicked, blah, blah, blah. He went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. So you've got Ananias, he's got his lawyer, he's got the Jewish elders, because Ananias was the high priest, so he would have been Jewish at this, he was kind of a bigwig in Jerusalem. So now they're all going down to Caesarea, and they're gonna bring charges against Paul. And then they start buttering the governor up. When Paul was called in, Tertullus, lawyer for the Jewish high priest, presented his case before Felix. But look how he starts. We have enjoyed a long period of peace under you, oh great and wonderful Felix. And your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation everywhere. Everywhere. See, I don't know how to do this. Everywhere and in every way, most excellent Felix. We acknowledge this with profound gratitude. But in order not to weary you further, I would request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly. We have found this man to be a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. He's a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. Their frustration with Paul is this: he's doing things different. He's doing things not how we have always done things. Completely different. He doesn't follow the law like we want him to. He's following this sect, this Jesus Nazarene guy. Everything's just not right. So they begin with something you and I have come to know this term well: fake news. All right? We think it just happened with Donald Trump, okay? It didn't. It happened 2,000 years ago in this particular court in the book of Acts. Look back what he said. Did I put it here? There you go. This is what they're saying. It's all fake. We have found this man to be a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews. Now, did Paul do those things? No, he didn't. He just went to tell people about Jesus. The Jews got mad. They started these riots. Paul had nothing to do with it. He was just trying to get the good news out. And I think it's so funny how they're like, he's the ringleader. It's his fault. It's all his fault. I was laughing the other day. We never turn on the news anymore, unless it's absolute necessity. Then I don't know what's going on in the world. If it's not on my screen when I wake up, I don't know, and I don't care anymore. But the one day we turned it on, I laughed because it was like, everything in the world is Donald Trump's fault. Everything. And it made me, there was a plane crash, and the newscaster came on and said, it's Donald Trump's fault. I was like, are you joking? What does that have to do with Donald Trump? And then there's a kidnapping. That's Donald Trump's fault. And then no one goes to the movies. It's Donald Trump's fault, okay? Everything is his fault. And I was thinking that must be how Paul must have felt back then. All Paul's doing is trying to get people to heaven, to do something good. But no, everyone hates Paul. And it's just, it went on back then, so just so you know that. Verse 6, this is what they were telling that Paul was doing. And he even tried to desecrate the temple, so we seized him. Could you imagine Paul desecrating this big, beautiful temple? Why would he do that? He's trying to reach the Jewish people with Jesus. He would never do that. And they were saying, oh, you brought a Gentile in. And that's what Paul would, it was a lie. It was an absolute lie. Here's the problem. Half-truths are more difficult to refute than outright lies. They just are. Half-truths are really tough to refute. If somebody came in here and said to you, I saw Lisa drinking at the bar the other night, okay? Well, it implies that I'm drinking alcohol in a bar. Now, maybe I was at the bar. I don't like alcohol. I was drinking a Dr. Pepper, okay? But you don't know that. You just heard this half-truth that said Lisa was at the bar drinking, and you're going to assume that it's alcohol, and then you're never coming back again. But it's a half-truth. See how hard that is? The problem is Paul was at the temple, but he wasn't desecrating it. He was there, but it's really difficult to determine the two. But the commander Lysias came by and with great violence took him out of our hands, half-truth, commanding his accusers to come to you. By examining him yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse him. And then the Jews joined in the accusation, asserting that these things were true. And then they give Paul a time to come up and refute everything that they were saying. So when Paul gets up, when the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied. This is what he said. I know that for a number of years you have been a judge over this nation, so I gladly make my defense. You can easily verify that no more than 12 days ago, I went up to Jerusalem to worship. He's saying, check it out. That's the truth. I did that. My accusers did not find me arguing with anyone at the temple or stirring up a crowd in the synagogues or anywhere in the city. And they cannot prove to you the charges they are now making against me. However, I admit that I worship the God of our Father as follower of the way, which they all call a sect. But I believe that agrees with the law, but I believe everything that agrees with the law and that is written in the prophets. In other words, he gets up in front of this group and he says, here's what you need to know. Jesus and me, we believe in your whole Old Testament. We believe how God created the world, and we believe in Noah's Ark and Moses parting the Red. Like, we believe all of that. Verse 15, and I have the same hope in God as these men, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. He's saying, in other words, I believe just what they do. These guys believe that there's going to be a resurrection, that we're going to all be resurrected after we die. He goes on to say, so I strive always to keep my conscience clear before God and men. After an absence of several years, I came to Jerusalem to bring my people gifts for the poor and to present offerings. That's all true. He was bringing a tithe or an offering to the church there. He said, I was ceremonial clean when they found me in the temple courts doing this. There was no crowd with me, or was I involved in any disturbance. He's saying, there you go. Everything you just heard is fake news. But there are some Jews from the province of Asia who ought to be here before you and bring charges if they have anything against me. In other words, if these guys really honestly think I did something, bring them here. Why aren't they here in this courtroom? He's saying those are the ones who should state what crime they found me in before I stood before the Sanhedrin. Let's see, where are we here? 21. Unless it was this one thing I shouted as I stood in their presence, it's concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. He's saying, looking at them, saying, look, I stood up and I said, there's going to be a resurrection. Okay, if I'm on trial for that, shame on all of you. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard in my entire life. Then Felix, who was well acquainted with the way, adjourned the proceedings. When Lysias, the commander, comes, I will decide your case. It's interesting because to our knowledge in the Bible, Lysias never showed up, which could be why he stayed in prison a couple extra years. Verse 23, he ordered the centurion to keep Paul under guard, but to give him some freedom and permit his friends to take care of his needs. I think that's a win for Paul. He's going to be there, and God's graciously giving him more time and to be able to be with his friends. But here's what I say. It still does not negate the fact that he does not want to be there. It doesn't negate the fact that he really wants to be in Rome. And some of you, it doesn't change the fact that you don't want to be sick, and you don't want to be in the middle of a divorce, and you don't want to be in the middle of that heartache. You don't. And yeah, I get that God loves me and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to be here. And I think Paul is the exact same way. But God was doing something different. And whatever you're going through, please understand that God is doing something different in your life. And for Paul, maybe it was Paul's out running around all the time and evangelizing and never sitting still for 5 seconds. But we needed books of the Bible written, Ephesians, Colossians, Romans. We needed those written. How are they going to be written if Paul's out doing all that he's doing? He almost just stopped Paul in his footsteps and said, you're going to sit down, and if you don't write it, you're going to start thinking about what you're going to write, because we got to get these books out. God always has a purpose why he's going to do it. So Paul did that. He stayed there for 2 years, and most likely, maybe he sat down and thought about what he would write in all of those books. But here's what you need to know for those of you who maybe are ill or you feel like Paul. Really grasp this. There's nothing you can do to change your situation. There isn't. And until God deems to change it, you might as well relax and enjoy the time, is my thinking on it. And I want to give you hope today. And it comes from a girl by the name of Tammy. When I was going through my whole thing about this trusting God thing, I found her website. And she wrote, it's called footstepsofinspiration.com. I got a hold of her and I said, I really want to share your stuff at Bible study because it was so good. Here's what she says. I'm Tammy. Started my blogging journey by way of chronic illness. You see, I've spent over 8 years living with chronic migraines. Most days it took everything I had just to put one foot in front of the others. In the midst of this struggle, my relationship with Jesus grew stronger. And I've learned more in this short period of time in my life than I've learned in all my years combined. See what happens if you stop and just let God work in your life? You're going to learn some really great stuff. Here are 5 things that she learned, and you got to learn these. I got to learn these. We have to learn these. Here's one of them. I'm not in control. And it's so incredibly freeing to know that I don't have to worry about what life throws at us. Really, when you grasp that, this light bulb goes on and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't control my marriage, my husband, my kids, my job, my boss. I can't control any of it. So you know what? It's freeing. You can sit back and go, you know what? I don't have to worry about it. God's got this. He's going to do whatever he needs to do. Here's the next one she learned. She said, I can trust God with everything in my life. There's nothing, everything is on the table with him. I'm trusting you with my wayward son, with my wayward husband, with my jerk of a boss, whatever it is. God, I'm trusting you with him. She said, it's possible to have both pain and peace at the same time. Think about it with her. She said, I had more pain, but I had peace. You can go through any tragedy in your life and have incredible amounts of pain and peace at the same time. And I'll tell you, I can talk to a bunch of you in here that have gone through very, very hard things, and you will tell me that is absolutely true. When you know and trust God. She said, I'm far more capable than I ever thought possible. Some of you are like, if that ever happened to me, I would fall apart. And no, you would be surprised at the grace that God gives you when something happens. And then I love this. I've been blessed to be a blessing. God doesn't want me to keep these things to myself, but rather to encourage others no matter what's going on in their lives. That's what she learned. See, she would never have written something so encouraging to other people if she didn't have migraines. Here's what she said. I'm ecstatic to say that after years of suffering from this debilitating illness, found a doctor who listened and was willing to think outside the box. Some of you come from places where you're like, well, I shouldn't see a doctor, I should pray. I get it. Pray, go see a doctor, because God gives us doctors and specialists and people that are really, really smart. I look at Cheyenne and I think if we didn't find a really great doctor for her right now, she'd still be a mess. So go to a doctor. You can do that. She said, after a hysterectomy, I'm living my life again. The migraines aren't gone, but I've definitely gotten my life back, and I'm so very grateful. You don't need to have a chronic illness to hang out with me. We all live in this difficult world and have to make a choice each and every day to focus on what we have to be thankful for rather than all the challenges we face. Don't get me wrong. It's not easy. I'm a work in progress. But I know that together we can help each other through the difficult times, come out stronger for it, and even learn to thank God for every teaching moment that we've been through. Because of my journey and the many struggles I've encountered, I'm living my life more intentionally, and my passion is to help you to do the same thing by living a Christ-centered life and going after your God-given dreams. So you can make it through anything. I'm promising you that. And I think her faith grew because of the hard times, because of the migraines. And yours can too. But sometimes he has to slow us down where there is nowhere to turn but looking up. Sometimes he slows us down. We do get sick. We get where we can't get out of bed as much as we used to. And sometimes it's to slow us down so we can get to know him better and spend more time in the Word and learn his voice better. So those aren't bad times. They're just different times. Now, I liked what she said at the very end about how it helps you to maybe help other people. And this is what was going on with Paul. He's in prison, but Governor Felix keeps calling for Paul. Paul, come talk to me. I want you to tell me what you believe. Look at this. Several days later, Felix, the governor, came with his wife Drusilla, who was a Jewess. He sent for Paul and listened to him as he spoke about faith in Christ. As Paul discussed on righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, that's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you now. Now, what's interesting about this is that they really wanted to know about salvation, about Jesus, what this was all about. Not only the governor, but his wife. I mean, think about that they both are hearing about Jesus because he's stuck in a place where he doesn't want to be 2 years longer. But he didn't get mad at God and say, I'm never going to talk about you anymore. He's like, my job, no matter where I am, is to tell people about Christ. But here's what you and I need to know from this little section here, is that I think God stopped Paul in his tracks 2,000 years ago so you and I can learn something really important. When confronted with Jesus, we have to make a choice. It's so imperative that we know that. Some of you here or some of you watching us have never given your life to Christ. And I want to tell you that when you're confronted with Christ, you've got to make a choice. Ronald Reagan said this. Once he had an aunt who took him to a cobbler for a new pair of shoes. The cobbler asked young Reagan, do you want square toes or round toes on your shoes? Unable to decide, Reagan didn't answer, so the cobbler gave him a few days. Several days later, the cobbler saw Reagan on the street, asked him again what kind of toes he wanted. Reagan couldn't decide, so the shoemaker replied, well, come by in a couple of days. Your shoes will be ready. When the future president went into the cobbler's, he found one square-toed shoe and one round-toed shoe. The cobbler said to him, this will teach you to never let people make decisions for you. Ronald Reagan said years later, I learned right then and there, if you don't make your own decisions, someone else will. When someone hears about Jesus being the only way to God, you have a choice. You are either going to follow him or you're not. And so many people don't follow Christ because they're so afraid of what that entails. What do you mean have to follow him? What do you mean have to do what he has to say? They'd rather just not. They're afraid like Felix, so they just push him away. But they don't realize that they're destroying their eternal salvation, eternity forever. They don't know that a decision needs to be made like today. This made me laugh about being afraid. 2 men were marooned on an island. One man paced back and forth, worried and scared, while the other man sat back and was sunning himself. The first man said, aren't you afraid we're going to die? No one's going to know we're here. The second man said, no, I'm not worried. I make $100,000 a week, and I tithe faithfully to my church. Trust me, my pastor will find me. No fear. There you go. But the question for Felix is this. What are you afraid of? What are you so afraid? What are you waiting for? On May 8th, 1902, at 8:02 p.m., almost 30,000 people died instantly in one of the world's worst natural disasters in history. And the immediate cause of their death was a violent volcanic eruption of Mount Pelée. I think it's in the French colonial island of Martinique. Once the volcano erupted, the townspeople never had a chance. But the question was, for the people who lived in the town, what were you waiting for? You saw that it was going to erupt. You saw it boiling over. There was all of these signs. You knew it was going to happen. Why didn't you run for your life? And the people in the town that ran the town, why didn't they stand up and say, everyone leave, quick, everyone leave? No one did. Because they just assumed that they were going to be okay. One of the greatest tragedies in life is when you procrastinate and you gamble with your life. But here you go. Even more tragic is when people gamble with their souls and their eternal destiny by putting off important spiritual decisions like, am I going to follow Jesus or am I not? Verse 26, here's Felix's problem. At the same time, he was hoping that Paul would offer him a bribe. So he sent for him frequently and talked with him. Felix wanted money for this world. He didn't care too much about when he died. And here's what you and I don't want you to make that same mistake today. Because here's what we know. Today can go away today. Today can go away today the minute you walk out of this room. Life can go away today. Rob and I were driving down the freeway, and they cut it off, and there was a yellow tape, and there was a motorcycle guy that had gotten in an accident, and he was covered with a yellow thing, which means he died. In one day, his life was over. And the problem is that so many people live our lives like this. You know what? Someday I'm going to go back to church. Someday I'm going to follow Jesus. Maybe someday. I'll get to it. Someday when I'm not busy, I'll go get baptized. Someday I'll start reading my Bible when the kids are grown and I have more time. Someday I will care about eternity. Please do not do that, because life can go away today. We all aren't promised tomorrow or the next hour. And if you're considering Jesus, I am begging you to make today the day that you say, Jesus, come into my life. I'm surrendering my life to you. It's like that volcano. You know it could happen any day. And if it does and you are not saved, you will spend eternal life, eternity in a place called hell. That is terrifying. And I don't want anyone to do what Felix did. There's a story told of a steamship called the Central American. They sprang a leak mid-ocean between New York and San Francisco. Another vessel saw the signal of distress and came going over to this ship. And the rescue ship called and said, what's going on? They said, well, we're in really bad repair, but stand by until morning. The rescue ship's like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, let me come there, pull up the side of you, we'll get your passengers off. And the guy on the captain of the Central American said, nope, stand by until morning. And the rescue ship sat there and watched this ship go down. And the lights suddenly disappeared, and every person on that ship went down and died a watery, horrible death. Because somebody thought they had till tomorrow. Salvation is offered today. If you are here and you're just like, I just kind of feel a stirring in my heart, then do something about it today. Because Felix, to our knowledge, never ever gave his life to Christ. And he wanted money, but you know what? He eventually died. And the problem is that Felix will be spending eternity in a place called hell. That makes me so frightened. Verse 27, when 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, but because Felix wanted to grant a favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison. He left Paul in prison for 2 years. Here's what Paul did. Trust that God had a purpose for where he was. That's what Paul did. He just trusted that God knew what he was doing. And while he was there, he kept doing what God wanted him to do, right? Talk to whoever he could, share his faith, without bitterness and frustration. I was bitter and frustrated weeks and weeks ago because I walked through this whole thing with Cheyenne with the light bulb off. You can walk through your situation with a light bulb on. And here's what I want to say to you. Please do not get discouraged in the place you are that you don't want to be. Whether it's migraines or OCD or a tragedy or a job loss or a depression or a bad marriage or whatever it is, please do not get discouraged. And please do not give up on God because you think he's not doing his job. Move away from thinking that trusting God means that God is here to do your bidding, when in reality it's exactly the opposite. When you and I give our lives to Christ, we're trusting him to open and close the doors and do whatever he needs to do with our life. Why? Because our job is to serve him, not the other way around. Our job is to serve him. It's not his job to serve us. See the difference there? Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and again Abednego, my God will get me out of the fire. Some of you are like, my God will make my husband love me. My God will get my child off of drugs. But we have to play that next verse out. But even if he doesn't, we're okay. Because God has a plan, and I am going to trust him with that, even though it might be different than what I expect. There's a story in your thing. You guys can read that on your own because we won't have time. But I think that's what trust is all about. It's recognizing that and hanging on no matter what it is that you're going through, knowing this, he's got this. Our job is this. Look at our next verse, last verse here. Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. It doesn't say trust God to give you what you want. It says, trust God with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding, because when I ask God to heal Cheyenne, that's my own understanding. When you ask God to do something that's your own understanding, he's saying, don't do that. Trusting God means trust him for what he wants, not what I want. Because this is what you need to know. The author always knows what he's doing. Father, thank you for your word today. God, so many people I know are going through this horrible time in their life where they just don't know what you're doing and they're frustrated and the light bulb feels off because it's like we just can't see through the tunnel. But I pray, God, for each person going through something that today they'll turn the light bulb on and say, all right, God, you got me here. And I'm going to get strong while I'm here. And you're going to teach me what you need to teach me. And then I'm going to get out there and share you with all these other people and show them what you have taught me. God, I pray that if anyone is here, they're discouraged and they want to walk away from you, I pray today they never do that. That's the day they wake up and say, you know what, God, you're the author. And I'm the character, and I have a huge part in this plot line, and I'm going with whatever you decide to do. Thank you, Jesus. If there's anyone here that doesn't know you, I pray today's the day they say, I want Jesus in my life. It is so simple. Jesus, come in my life. Thank you for all you do for us in Jesus' name. Amen.